Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wading into a situation, really a crisis, that's become almost a national symbol of failure. We saw it exposed pretty starkly in that documentary, The Alabama Solution.
Yes.
We're looking at Alabama's state correctional system. It's a system the U.S. Department of Justice has actually sued, citing, well, profoundly unconstitutional conditions.
That's right. Systemic violence, rampant sexual abuse, excessive force by staff. It's not just one or two places. The DOJ found this across all 13 male facilities.
Imagine that. A whole system cited for pervasive failure.
Yeah.
And now it's facing this huge choice, right? How do you even begin to fix something that broken?
And that is precisely our mission for you today. This deep dive isn't just about, listing the problems. It's about really analyzing the proposed solutions. We need to grasp the sheer severity of these institutional failures first. And then we need to dissect two fundamentally opposing paths forward. On one hand, you've got the state's massive multi-billion-dollar infrastructure plan, basically build bigger, newer prisons. And on the other, a comprehensive alternative reform proposal focused entirely on technology, rehabilitation, and crucially, culture change.
So new buildings versus a new mindset, essentially.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, let's unpack that core problem first then. Because the severity, like you said, it's staggering. And these conditions, they aren't isolated incidents, are they? It's systemic.
Absolutely systemic. The DOJ lawsuit specifically mentions the state's failure to protect prisoners from violence, from sexual abuse, and also the constant pervasive use of excessive force by staff.
Right.
This isn't just, a few bad apples or a management issue in one prison. It's an institutional crisis.
And the numbers, I assume, back that up.
Oh, they certainly do, starkly. In 2023 alone, Alabama's prisons saw 335 deaths.
335.
Yes. To give you some context, that's one of the highest death rates in the entire nation for prison systems. And those deaths included 14 homicides and 101 drug overdoses.
100 ODs inside.
Wow. It points to facilities that are just fundamentally unsafe. Zones of immense, consistent danger, not places of correction.
And beyond the deaths, the day-to-day violence must be constant.
It is. If you just look at, say, the 2-year period between late 2019 and late 2021, the official data shows over 1,100 prisoner-on-prisoner assaults. 1,100.
And how does staffing play into this? I remember hearing about Meiji shortages.
Critically, this atmosphere of violence is absolutely directly tied to the staffing crisis. In early 2021, 8 of the male prisons had total staff vacancy rates over 50%.
50%.
Yeah, think about that. Places like Bullitt Correctional Facility, 60% vacancy. Donaldson, 58%. When you're that short-staffed, you rely massively on overtime. That drives burnout. And burnout, well, it leads directly to failures in management, increases in corruption, and an inability to maintain basic safety. It's all deeply interconnected.
So violence, deaths, understaffing. And I imagine this whole mess costs the state a fortune.
A fortune is right. The prison system eats up a huge chunk, 25% of the state's general fund budget. We're talking about $5 billion in projected spending over just 5 years through 2026. And that includes debt service for construction.
$5 billion.
And that's not even the full picture. The financial drain goes beyond just operations. You have to look at the legal costs, too.
Defending against lawsuits.
Exactly. What's really fascinating, or maybe alarming, is the cost simply to defend the Department of Corrections employees against allegations of things like excessive force, wrongful deaths. That specific cost quadrupled between 2020 and 2024. Quadrupled.
So how much are we talking?
We're talking $17.4 million in claims paid out from the state's General Liability Trust Fund, just for those types of cases.
$17 million. That's the direct price tag for the system's own failures. They're literally paying out for the consequences of the unconstitutional conditions the DOJ is suing them over.
Precisely. It's the legal cost of systemic failure made plain.
Okay. So the system is demonstrably failing. On a human level, operationally, financially, it's a crisis by any measure. Given all that, what has been the state's main response? You mentioned the infrastructure plan.
Right. Their primary approach, the one they've put most energy into, is called the Alabama Prison Transformation Initiative, APTI for short. And its focus is almost entirely on the physical facilities, consolidating 14 older facilities into 4 new, massive, supposedly state-of-the-art regional prisons.
They're mega prisons, basically.
Essentially, yes. It's a bricks-and-mortar solution. The plan is huge. 3 new men's facilities, each designed for 4,000 beds.
4,000.
Each. And 1 new women's facility with 1,200 beds. The initial estimated cost was around $800 million, financed through a 30-year bond issue.
Okay, $800 million. But how do they plan to pay off that debt, especially with the state budget already strained?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, quite controversial. The state's plan is to cover the $50 million annual debt service through projected operational savings that they expect to get from consolidating the facilities.
Operational savings. How?
They project saving about $17 million a year from needing fewer staff overall, another $21 million saved by reducing overtime, and $10 million by consolidating healthcare administration from 14 different sites down to just 3 regional hubs.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Yes.
You just detailed how a core driver of the current crisis is severe understaffing and the resulting burnout from forced overtime.
Correct.
But their financial plan to pay for the fix relies on reducing staff and overtime even further.
That's the inherent contradiction critics jump on immediately.
Yes.
The model seems to bake in making the core problem worse to pay for the supposed solution. It looks like a self-defeating prophecy built right into the funding mechanism.
That seems problematic.
To say the least. And then there's the other controversy, how they funded the initial construction.
Right, I heard something about COVID funds.
Yes. They allocated $400 million, nearly half the initial estimate from federal COVID-19 stimulus funds. Money that was intended for pandemic relief, community aid, healthcare support.
Using stimulus money meant for community health to build prisons.
That's what happened. And critics, understandably, argued this showed a fundamental misplacement of priorities, taking $500 million meant for community support and rerouting it to subsidize mass incarceration infrastructure.
So massive spending, controversial funding sources, a financial plan that seems to contradict the problem it's supposed to solve. But the criticism isn't just about money, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. Reform advocates, they've called the infrastructure plan things like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Strong words.
And the Justice Department itself, in its findings, explicitly stated that new facilities alone will not resolve the contributing factors to the unconstitutional conditions.
So the DOJ is saying buildings aren't the core issue.
Exactly. They're pointing out that things like understaffing, corruption, deep-seated management failures that allow drugs and violence to thrive, those things will still exist whether the building is brand new or 50 years old. The culture is the problem, not just the concrete.
And you also have pushback from the local communities where these mega prisons are supposed to go, right?
Huge pushback. Groups like No Prison for Tallahassee and Block the Briarfield Prison. And they have legitimate concerns. Think about it. Putting a 4,000-bed prison in a small town like Tallahassee nearly doubles the local population overnight.
Wow, yeah.
So residents are worried, understandably, about overwhelming local resources, schools, roads, emergency services. They worry about property values dropping, increased traffic. It's a massive burden on these small communities for a benefit that many statewide question.
So the state's main answer is focused on the container, the buildings themselves. But at the same time this is happening, there are policy changes making it harder for people to actually leave the system.
Yeah.
Kind of sealing the container shut.
That's a really critical piece of this puzzle, yes. This secondary barrier, the way they've tightened the parole valve, is crucial to understand. The parole grant rate has just plummeted. It was around 54% back in 2017. In recent years, it's fallen as low as 8 to 10%.
8%, down from over 50.
Yes. For many people serving long sentences, this has effectively created de facto life without parole sentences. It obviously exacerbates overcrowding, but it also deepens the sense of hopelessness inside, which fuels further problems.
And this wasn't just like a gradual shift, it was policy.
Oh, it was policy. New guidelines were actually mandated by the state legislature. The parole system had to adopt them to even get its funding. And these guidelines made it significantly tougher to get a positive recommendation.
How so? What changed?
The scoring system, the score sheet they use, was overhauled. Previously, maybe a score up to 7 could get you recommended for parole. Now, a score of 6 to 8 is just neutral, meaning you could easily still be denied. And a score of 9 or higher is basically grounds for automatic denial. That's a huge shift from the old denial threshold, which was 8.
So what specifically changed on those score sheets? Forget the numbers for a sec. What does this practically mean for someone inside who might have genuinely turned their life around?
Practically, it means the system is now heavily prioritizing punishment, the original crime, over any evidence of rehabilitation. For example, the penalty points assigned just for the severity of the original offense. That doubled, from a max of 2 points to 4 points.
So focusing on something that happened maybe decades ago.
Exactly, static factors. Things that can't change regardless of someone's behavior or growth over years, even decades, inside. And conversely, look at how they evaluate institutional behavior following the rules, participating in programs. That's now restricted to only the last 12 months.
Only the last year.
Yes. So critics argue this is a massive disincentive for long-term good behavior. If someone maintained a perfect disciplinary record for 10, 15 years, that counts for very little if the focus is only the last year. It essentially discards potentially decades of positive change.
It really sounds like a policy almost designed to ensure fewer people get out no matter what.
That's certainly the practical effect many observers point to. And there's another really tough barrier built in, the penalty for having an incomplete reentry plan.
What does that mean?
Applicants get penalized if they don't have, like, a confirmed place to live or a job lined up before their parole hearing.
But how can someone incarcerated easily secure housing or a job from inside prison? Especially without internet access or job fairs.
That's precisely the criticism. It's incredibly difficult. You're essentially penalizing people for failing to achieve something the system itself makes almost impossible to achieve while they're still incarcerated.
So, okay, we have this picture of systemic failure being met with a massive infrastructure spend while policies simultaneously clamp down on release. It's quite a scenario.
Yeah.
Now, let's pivot hard. You mentioned a completely different approach, an alternative vision.
Right.
One that argues the solution isn't concrete, but open source artificial intelligence. Tell us about that.
Yes, this alternative, often framed as something like the AI for Humane Prison Reform Initiative, takes a totally different philosophical approach. Instead of just focusing on the walls, it aims to rebuild the system's focus on safety, transparency, education, and genuine rehabilitation, using modern technology as the tool. This is what proponents argue gets at the cultural and structural change the DOJ says is necessary.
Okay, AI in prisons. That sounds potentially dystopian or maybe revolutionary. How does it work? Is it structured?
It's structured around 4 core pillars, aiming to address problems across the whole correctional ecosystem, not just containment.
All right, let's hear them. Pillar 1.
Pillar 1 is education for all. The idea is a massive expansion of access to online education college-level courses, but also, crucially, vocational training. Think marketable trades, carpentry, computer networking, coding, plumbing, electrical work, things that lead to real jobs.
And where does the AI come in?
It comes in through things like AI-enhanced tutors, personalized learning platforms that adapt to each individual's pace and needs, and critically, building digital literacy skills, which are absolutely essential for anyone re-entering society and the job market today.
Okay, education makes sense. What's Pillar 2?
Pillar 2 tackles communication equity. Right now, prison communication systems are dominated by proprietary companies. You mentioned IC Solutions earlier.
Right, the expensive phone calls.
Exactly. Notorious for really high per-minute charges, sometimes making a simple 15-minute call cost upwards of $15. Plus, lots of complaints about poor service, issues with refunds. It puts a huge financial burden on families.
So the alternative proposes
Replacing those expensive, often dysfunctional proprietary systems with open-source alternatives, things like Asterisk, Jitsi, FreeSWITCH.
Why do those specific names matter? Open source means?
Open source means the software is free or very low cost and customizable. This allows the state to dramatically lower or even eliminate the cost of phone calls and video visits for families. Maintaining family ties, as we know, is one of the single biggest factors in reducing recidivism, in preventing people from coming back to prison. The current system financially punishes families for trying to stay connected. This tech change makes connection affordable, which directly improves the odds of successful reentry.
That seems like a straightforward, impactful change. Okay, so education, communication. What about the core safety issues, the violence, the self-harm that prompted the DOJ lawsuit?
That's Pillar 3, AI-enabled safety and rehabilitation. This isn't just about more cameras. It's about using AI tools, again, open source where possible, for proactive safety.
Proactive how?
Things like real-time analysis of audio and video feeds to detect fights or signs of distress before they escalate into serious violence or self-harm attempts. Generating automated alerts for staff. It could also mean using AI to analyze behavioral data to flag individuals at high risk for mental health crises, allowing for earlier intervention, and even facilitating restorative justice processes by helping match willing victims with incarcerated individuals for mediated dialogue.
So shifting from just surveillance to actual intervention and support.
Exactly. Using technology not just for control, but to actively promote safety and psychological well-being, identifying potential threats before they fully materialize.
Okay. And the last pillar, you mentioned the staff earlier, the burnout crisis.
Right. Pillar 4 is empowering staff and transparency. This is critical because you can't fix the system without addressing the issues facing correctional officers. The proposal suggests using AI-driven analytics, anonymously of course, to understand the root causes of staff burnout scheduling issues, lack of support, specific facility stressors. This data can then inform targeted training, better resource allocation, maybe even policy changes like improved pay or different work schedules, like a 4-day-a-week option, to improve retention.
And the transparency part.
That involves publishing open dashboards, real-time, public-facing data on key metrics: violence incidents, educational program completion rates, staffing levels, use of force incidents.
Making the system accountable to the public.
Precisely. Rebuilding public trust requires radical transparency, showing progress or lack thereof in real time. This is seen as a necessary ingredient for genuine, lasting reform.
So this alternative vision, it's a complete contrast.
Yeah.
Instead of banking on shaky operational savings from consolidation to pay off construction debt, this tech-infused model focuses on investing in people, training inmates for real jobs, making family contact affordable, using AI for safety and mental health, supporting staff better. It tackles the cultural issues head-on.
That's the core argument. It addresses the root causes the DOJ identified: the understaffing, the violence, the lack of rehabilitation opportunities, the management failures, rather than just building newer, bigger containers for the same problems.
So the conflict really remains starkly defined, doesn't it?
Extremely. You have the state pushing forward with a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure plan that critics insist ignores the deep systemic cultural failures. And then you have this alternative, proposing a holistic, tech-driven overhaul designed to make the system fundamentally safer, more educational, and crucially, more transparent.
It seems clear the crisis in Alabama's prisons is severe, undeniably so. But the pathway out, it seems, involves so much more than just steel and concrete.
It really does.
It seems to demand a deep, genuine commitment to rehabilitation, to transparency, and using modern tools like technology to actually fix the cultural rot that seems to plague the current system.
Well said.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. We know that incarcerated activists have, in the past, used contraband cell phones, smuggled phones, to get word out, to expose the, quote, real-life horrors inside Alabama's prisons directly to the public, bypassing the official channels.
Yes, they've used them to reach the court of public opinion.
Right. Now, the state is preparing to spend even more money, this time on installing cell phone jammers, to block all unauthorized communication, even inside the brand new facilities they plan to build. So ask yourself this: if the new buildings go up and that flow of information from the inside is completely cut off, will the systemic issues, the violence, the corruption, the neglect, actually be resolved? Or will they simply become invisible once again?